Marta Oved in with her boyfriend at the end of her studies. From the priests, she heard significantly different instructions, from the fact that her confession was hypocrisy to the comforting words to remember that sincere love does not hurt anyone. So Marta and her fiancé decided to wait until the wedding to rent an apartment. Today, we don't argue about dirty socks because living together was not necessary for us to know and talk about our weaknesses, he explains. This is what observance of the sixth commandment looks like in practice. Marta cannot come to terms with the contradiction she sees in the sacrament of penance. I lived with a guy who supported me, we respected each other and took care of each other, but in the confessional, we were the worse ones than those who meet for one night, she explains. Marta does not regret that she put off living together until the wedding. However, her relatives still cannot believe that she and her husband have created a successful relationship without it. Living together only makes sense if it is to be accompanied by constant stress about what the priest or parents will say, says the psychologist and sexologist. As he adds, sometimes getting your way makes the relationship weaker. Therefore, the decision to live together should be well thought out, with all its consequences, he points out. Sixth commandment, do not commit adultery. In the Catechism, you will read that it means not only do not cheat but also do not masturbate, do not watch pornography, do not expose yourself, and keep your thoughts pure. For Catholics, premarital sex is a sin, as is contraception. And living together before marriage is a constant opportunity to do so. Young Catholics, although statistics show that there are fewer and fewer of them, live in constant dilemmas, torn between the Decalogue and the realities of life in the 21st century. And we are not talking only about premarital sex. According to their accounts, this sin was recited in the confessional at the very. Finally, in an even lower voice than the others, priests usually absolve without further questions. But, unfortunately, living together is not so easy. Marta. I wanted to laugh when in the first season of Sexify Paulina ran to confession after every night spent with Marius. Maybe it was a bit exaggerated, but somehow I understood her. If faith is essential for someone, it is not only going to church when visiting parents but persisting in sin causing actual discomfort, explains 31-year-old Marta. 7 years ago, at the end of her studies, she was hesitant to move in with her then boyfriend. But, as he explains, they wanted to save time traveling between rented rooms. In practice, we've been staying a week at my place and a week at his for some time. So it didn't make sense to pay for 2 rooms, even if it wasn't expensive in Katowice back then, he explains. Soon her friend was vacating a studio apartment in an attractive location for both of them. They considered it a sign of fate, and organized the move. Some beliefs these days are pretty archaic for young people, difficult to reconcile, and impractical, especially since, from a scientific point of view, living and getting to know each other before getting married is the right thing to do. It allows people to check how much they can create everyday life with each other, how they build intimacy when they are with each other all the time, and not only on special occasions, says Kate, a psychologist and sexologist. The specialist observes that young people is not easy to reconcile the desire to live together with the simultaneous desire to remain in line with their religious values. However, from my point of view, Fewer and fewer couples have this dilemma, and living together before marriage is already something familiar in both larger and smaller cities, he notes. In her opinion, if someone decides to do this, they should have well thought out priorities and be able to define their values so that their religious dilemmas do not overshadow the relationship and do not burden the other party with a sense of guilt that it is because of her that things are not going well in the relationship. Magda. Magda is 29 years old. She met her husband at the beginning of her studies. They had been dating for some time when her friends asked when they could take her room. She surprised them by saying she wasn't going anywhere. It certainly wasn't easy at first. Especially since both my husband and I are, as it is commonly said, practicing people, that is, we engage in church matters, we try to keep the commandments, and we stick to the sacraments. We knew we didn't want to live together before we got married, not just for religious reasons, but simply for human reasons, she explains. As he explains, the beginning of their relationship was not only a time of getting to know each other but also getting to know each other. Time, space, and energy were needed not only to build our relationship but also to build our characters, passions, dreams, aspirations, and plans, he adds. Over time, Magda vacated a room in an apartment rented by her friends but did not take the suitcases to her boyfriend. Instead, she decided to rent a studio apartment and give herself more space. Living together only makes sense if it is to be accompanied by constant stress about what the priest or parents will say, says the psychologist. He believes that before informing loved ones about the decision, the couple should agree on what strategy they are adopting. Here, I recommend assertiveness, i.e., getting your way and trying to explain, for example, to parents that their attacks or unfavorable comments hurt us. It's important to act maturely in the whole situation. Act according to yourself and explain to your parents that bans or shouting will not build an alliance with us, he explains. As he adds, sometimes getting your way makes the relationship weaker. Therefore, the decision to live together should be well thought out, with all its consequences. It is a matter of values, and the answer to the question of what is essential in life reminds the psychologist. I was nervous about my parents' reaction, but they swallowed it somehow. Because of their faith, it was certainly not easy for them, but they must have realized that times were changing and expected this moment to come. They only asked me not to tell my grandma about it because she wouldn't survive it, recalls Marta. She had been sleeping with her boyfriend before they moved in and confessed regularly. Well, maybe not as regularly as on this show, but before every holiday and major family events like weddings. I have never had a problem with absolution, no bitter words have ever been uttered, she recalls. Everything changed after moving to a studio apartment. It was before Christmas. I remember that my ears were burning with rage when I left the church, she says. She expected that she would not get absolution. Still, she did not think that the priest would tell her so much. Over time, Marta noticed that every priest has a different opinion. One said he felt sorry for me, and that my confession was hypocrisy until I moved out. Another said that he would not absolve me, because he could not. Still, he told me to remember that the most important thing is that I do not hurt anyone with sincere love, and wished me to put things in order so that I would not feel torn between love for God and love for man. He was really nice. Some tried to find excuses. They asked if it was a student apartment or if we were planning a wedding. Sometimes I got absolution, she recalls. In the meantime, Magda accepted her boyfriend's proposal. Finally, after a few years of engagement, she was ready to move in with him. But my fiancé at the time still kept to the line that he wanted to live together only after marriage, so quite naturally, after ups and downs, we went to the sacrament, she says. The psychologist notes that it is worthwhile for the partners to discuss their possible dilemmas. Maybe faith is just a substitute topic. In fact, we just don't want to, we can't, we don't feel that living together makes sense? He asks, adding that living together is a big responsibility, a big step into adulthood. Not every young couple is mature enough to take this step. However, suppose we have church prohibitions on one side and love on the other. In that case, he advises that it is worth making a choice according to what gives us a sense of satisfaction and what is in line with our values, not family values. Today, Magda and Derek have been married for a year. Is it harder for us to be together now? Are we arguing over dirty socks? Or did I not meet my future husband before the wedding? Absolutely not. Why? Because living together in our case was not necessary to know and talk about our weaknesses. I didn't need 5 years of rehearsal to decide on marriage, she assures, adding that she speaks for herself because she knows that people are different. For us, apart from the religious factor, it was also important to simply build ourselves as individuals, he says. Marta did not feel wrong that she did not receive absolution while living with her boyfriend, but admits that it annoyed her how many contradictions she began to see in the sacrament of penance. I know, the church does not recognize cohabitation without marriage, and I accept it. But I have a friend, a believer and a practitioner, who has not been in any stable relationship for several years, but has been experiencing many casual adventures. And she, going to confession, did not listen to sermons about how she should immediately change her lifestyle. All she said was that she had unmarried sex with someone, the priest said 2 sentences, knocked and it was over. I lived with a guy who supported me, we respected and cared for each other, but in the confessional, we were the worse ones than those who meet for one night, she says. She doesn't regret living with her partner. Their relationship did not last, and she treats it as proof that it is worth getting to know each other better before getting married. Who knows, maybe without living together, our differences in worldview would also come to light and we would also part. Maybe not? And now I'd be stuck in an unhappy marriage? Despite everything, he concludes that living together before marriage, at least for a while, should be mandatory. For the first 6 months after the wedding, Magda's relatives asked her about her impressions after living together. Are you sure we're not going to divorce? And how disappointed are we about living together? Such accusations mean nothing to me, he says. The most important thing for her was that she did everything according to her conscience, just like my husband did with his. But, at the same time, he assures that he does not condemn Catholics who choose otherwise. If someone's intuition, subconsciousness, or reason suggests a different way, I wish you luck and nothing to do with it, he concludes. The psychologist reminds us that religious rules prohibit living together before marriage, mainly to avoid intercourse before the wedding. But creating a home together is so much more. It's a responsibility, caring for the other person, setting boundaries, the ability to take care of yourself without parental support, he explains, adding that this is a task for mature people, and if we still lack this inner readiness, we should give ourselves more time.